do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
The Charlotte Hornets need to find their star. They have a few players on the roster that have the potential to be above average or even borderline all-star level, but especially now that they don't have Kemba Walker anymore, they need somebody who can carry this franchise. What's up, everybody? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. Today we're going to be talking about the Charlotte Hornets. Now, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. It was a surprising breakout year for Devonte Graham, who averaged nearly 20 points coming out of nowhere to do that. He was, a second-round pick, didn't really play much last year, wasn't projected to be really anything in the NBA, and then all of a sudden he blossomed into a great scorer for this Hornets roster, a good backcourt partner for Terry Rozier, and really outperformed what anybody had as realistic expectations for him in his second season. So with Devonte, I think a lot of people might be a little bit overreacting to what we saw from him this season. I don't think he's going to be a bad player. Certainly, I think he is going to be a role player in the NBA for a long time. He will certainly have a role on a lot of, any team in the league would like to have a guy like Devonte Graham. But I think if you're, projecting him to be an all-star or like one of the league's leading scorers or, a really good point guard on a championship team, I just don't think you're being super realistic for Devonte, because really I think what we've seen from him, I don't think this was a flash in the pan type of year. I think he will sustain somewhere around this level of production, but really the long-term role that I see him in is more of a sixth man microwave scorer off the bench. Think like Lou Williams, Norman Powell, Jamal Crawford in the past. Typically guys with his skill set. He's not a great defender, he's pretty small, and it feels like this is around where his ceiling is going to be. He'll probably get a little bit better as he continues to age and get more experience in the NBA, but I think this is about what we're going to see from him over the course of his career. And so the Hornets, I don't think, should be placing all of their eggs in the basket of, Devonte Graham is our future all-star point guard. And I don't necessarily think that they are, but maybe I think some fans have been a little bit overreacting to his season that he just turned in. It was a good one to be sure, but let's pump the brakes on all-star Devonte Graham. But I do definitely think that he can be a core piece of their plans moving forward, and he can be a factor into a championship team, whether it's here in Charlotte or anywhere else around the league. PJ Washington was their first round pick last year, and he was one of the guys in that draft who didn't get as much coverage, wasn't as talked about as a lot of those other guys that was picked in the lottery, but he definitely was one of the better rookies last year, averaging around 12 points a game. He played a nice role for the Hornets, being able to start right away at that power forward spot. He can do a couple nice things for you, and PJ Washington is a player who I think, he has quite a bit of potential left. He's only 21 years old, so certainly he will get better from where he was after a solid rookie year. I don't anticipate him to ever really be an all-star or anything. If they can get anything more than like an above average starter out of him, he can probably at his peak maybe average around 17, 18 points a game on a pretty good team. I feel like is a decent expectation for him. Like I said, I don't project him as an all-star caliber player, but maybe he surprises some people. We'll just have to see what he does to build on a solid rookie campaign, to see if he can avoid that sophomore slump. And he is one of the guys who the Hornets should be looking at as a guy who can potentially be a part of this team for a long time. Him, and then a guy who I'll mention in a second, and whoever they draft this year. So Miles Bridges is the other guy who I project to be in the Hornets' long-term plans. I've seen a couple people talking down on Miles Bridges and saying, I've seen his name pop up in trade rumors, or, potentially just saying that he's not going to get much better than he is right now, that he's kind of maxed out his potential, and I think I disagree. He's only 21 years old, averaged 13 points a game in 30 minutes this year, which is pretty solid for a second-year player. He, on the wing, he's got some good size, he can defend at a pretty good level, is a pretty good shooter as well, about league average, not great, but also very serviceable. And this is a guy who I project as a pretty solid 3-and-D wing down the line, and I definitely think he can get a lot better from where he is right now. He's got the physical tools, and he's still very young, like I mentioned, at 21 years old. So this is a guy who I definitely think plays winning basketball, and I can see him on a good team moving forward, whether that's with the Hornets or not, who knows. But I think they should hold on to him at least through the duration of this rookie contract, probably hand him an extension when he's eligible for one. And I think this this is a guy who really could, make an impact and plays winning basketball and had a good college career and all that stuff. I like what I see from Miles Bridges so far. He's just one of my players that I just like for whatever reason, and I definitely think that he can be a contributor for the Hornets. So let's take a look at the cap sheet and what they might do this offseason. They have, not too many key free agents. Most of their guys are locked up, and they're going to have a little bit of cap space, but I'll get into that in a second. First of all, Nicholas Batum has that $27 million player option. He's going to opt in and take that money. This is a guy who it's just been a really, really bad contract for Charlotte. He has not lived up to the hype, has, been injured and not very good when he even is healthy, and for that option to be $27 million, that's a lot, and it might be the worst contract in the league. I mean, now that it's expiring, probably not anymore, because an expiring contract, it'll come off the books after this year, and even then an expiring is a little bit easier to put into a trade or whatever. If they aren't able to find a trade for him, would not be surprised to see a buyout or something like that in order to get him off of the roster around the deadline, and he can go sign with a contender or whatever. I just assume that the Hornets want nothing to do with him anymore. If they can find a trade, cool, but nobody's going to want to be trading for that massive contract. They're not going to be able to trade him unless it's in some sort of a sign and trade for somebody, or a trade for a guy making a lot of money and taking on draft picks or whoever. You can talk about that all you want, but Batum is going to pick up the option, and they're going to have him on the hook for at least one more season, which is just unfortunate. That contract has been very crippling to them over the length of it, and they're going to be throwing a party in Charlotte when eventually that one goes off the books. Bismack Biyombo also expiring. He's not going to re-sign. He's probably going to go sign a minimum deal with a contender. He doesn't make sense for the timeline here. Doesn't really fit anyway. So they're going to let him get out of there. Willie Hernan-Gomez, Dwayne Bacon are both into the bench type players. Not really consequential whether either one of them re-signs. Neither of them played too many minutes. If the Hornets still believe either of them have some potential, then sure. If not, then it's perfectly fine to let them go. And that's pretty much it. Other than that, they've got a bunch of guys still on rookie deals, and then a couple who are being paid, namely Terry Rozier and Cody Zeller, both of which I anticipate to be shopped around in the trade market. Even though they did just trade for Terry Rozier, they did that sign and trade with Kemba Walker to the Celtics for Rozier. And he is an okay player, but that's a lot of money for him. And if they can get rid of that contract to somebody else who might want him, he is okay, and I can anticipate him being at least a little bit desirable, even though that contract is $19 million, $18 million. He is still at least a guy who can play, and so if a contender can find room for him under their cap on their roster, then maybe it makes sense there. The Hornets can get some cap relief and get maybe a pick or two back. They're not going to be great picks, but later picks or some marginal young player. Similar deal with Cody Zeller, who's an expiring contract, probably a little easier to trade. He's still also an okay player, a little bit less expensive, and because that is an expiring deal, it could be thrown in somewhere else to facilitate. Maybe they could be brought in as a third or fourth party to facilitate some sort of deal, and get, take back maybe a longer term salary with some picks attached, and let somebody else take Cody Zeller as an expiring to clear some cap space off their books. I would not be surprised to see that happen there. And then other than that, you're thinking about, maybe a trade for Malik Monk, who I believe is still currently suspended by the NBA. He was suspended indefinitely for PEDs, if I'm not mistaken. He is a guy who has not lived up to the hype so far. I liked him in the draft, thought he was okay his first couple of years, but it seems like his time is kind of running out here. Has been sort of hyped as a six-man bench scorer, similar to actually what Devonte Graham has turned into and been way better at it than Malik Monk ever has been. And Monk he's going to have to prove that he can actually play, because it's just been a lot of opportunity and not a lot of actual results out of him. So, if he's able to come back and play next year, he's going to have to prove a lot for the Hornets to want to offer him any type of extension. And other than that, hold on to PJ Washington, hold on to Miles Bridges, Devonte Graham, maybe work on an extension for Devonte Graham, because even though I did kind of say I don't foresee him as the starting point guard of the future, I do think he definitely has a role here, and I think it's worth, a pretty decent amount of money to bring him back. Certainly, upwards of $15 million a year, I think is probably about what he'll get. Might not happen till next offseason, but they should guarantee his salary for this year and then potentially work on an extension so that they don't have any, conflicts down the line. But that's pretty much all what they should look at this offseason. Potentially trading Rozier and Zeller if you can. Batum is going to be really hard to move unless it's in some sort of a salary dump from another team, like I said. So Batum and Zeller as expiring contracts, potentially taking on some longer term money in order to get back some draft picks and younger players as well is not a bad idea for Charlotte, considering they're not really a free agency destination anyway. And if you do want to look at signing some free agents, I don't think Montrezl Harrell is a bad option. If you can get him for a cheap deal, because it seems like his value has gone down quite a bit, especially after his run in the bubble. So maybe you can get him for around $15-16 million a year, and I do think he fits well. He can play that big man spot, athletic. Even if he still comes off the bench there, I think it makes sense for him, and that's a chance for him to get a payday. And really, teams at the top of the lottery like this, Harrell is probably outside of their timeline, but I just think the Hornets needs a little bit of juice. And if you can bring Montrezl Harrell in and, potentially flip him 1 or 2 years down the line, if that contract is tradable, which I think it will be, flip him 1 or 2 years down the line once he gets closer to expiring, contenders will want to have a shot at him. And you can just bring him in next year to give yourself a little bit of excitement and flashiness, because this team is in desperate need of some attention and some hype around him, because right now there's just not a lot of juice surrounding the Hornets, which is unfortunate because I think they actually have a pretty young and interesting roster, but nobody's really tuning into the games. So somebody like Montrezl Harrell, and getting a certain player in the draft who I will mention in a second. So the Hornets have the 3rd overall pick in this year's draft. We're finally into the top 3. And so what do I think they should do with it? Well, it seems like they want James Wiseman, which I don't think is a bad option. We've heard a lot of rumors around the Hornets and James Wiseman. Whether or not he's going to be there at 3, or if they want to trade up to 1 or 2 to try to get him. Either way, I don't think it's necessarily a bad option. Depends on what you're giving up. If it's Miles Bridges, I wouldn't do it. If it's a future protected pick, then sure, we can have a conversation. But, if it takes too much to leap over Golden State, either whether it's with the Warriors themselves or up to number 1 with Minnesota, it's not a bad idea if you're not giving up too much. And if you don't think James Wiseman is going to be there at 3, which I think there's a chance he might be. And I'll get into the reasons why Minnesota and Golden State might pass on him in their respective videos, which are going up later. But for right now, I think that Wiseman is probably the best fit from a basketball standpoint, but to get some juice and hype around this Hornets team, I think the best fit is, who, LaMelo Ball. Putting him in Charlotte, where the owner is Michael Jordan of the Jordan brand. I know he's not signed with them, but I mean, you can see the connection there with the Jordan sneakers and having the most polarizing and popular player in the draft process. LaMelo, while he might not make sense as much from a basketball standpoint, although realistically, with this Hornets roster, something that I've said for a long time is teams at the top of the draft don't necessarily need to draft for fit. A lot of these rosters are pretty barren, and you just should take whoever you think is the best player available. And I think that is especially true here with Charlotte. While they do have Devonte Graham, PJ Washington, Miles Bridges, like I said, Devonte Graham I think projects best as a 6th man. So if you think a point guard is the best option, take a point guard. Miles Bridges is a guy who can play realistically the 2, 3, or the 4. He can play that wing spot, and I think he has enough size. Maybe he's not quite big enough to play the 4 spot, but either the 2 or the 3 I think are reasonable options for him. And PJ Washington as well, as I think is a pretty switchable guy. He can play a little bit of small ball 5 even, but his most natural fit's probably at the 4. I think he can even slide up to the 3 in a bigger lineup. So what I'm basically telling you is the Hornets don't have any clear position that's filled. The players that they do have that are going to be on the roster for a while are switchable, and I think Devonte Graham should come off the bench long term. So if you're going to draft a player, LaMelo Ball, even though he's ball dominant, I think it makes sense there, because if you think he's the best player, go ahead and take him. If at 3, or if you really want him, you can trade up to 1 and try to get him, because now there's buzz about the Timberwolves selecting him at 1. We have no idea what's going to happen at the top of this draft. There's been so much smoke screening going on. Minnesota, Golden State, one day they want to trade down. One day the Timberwolves are going to pick Edwards. One day they're going to pick LaMelo. One day they're going to pick James Wiseman. One day the Warriors are going to get Wiseman. Oh, they want Avdia. Oh, they like Isaac Okoro. Oh, they like whoever. Nobody knows. But what the Hornets do know is at 3rd overall, you will have the option of one of Wiseman, Edwards, or Ball. And any of the 3 of them I think is a good choice. Any of the 3 of them I think works there in Charlotte. I think it makes sense to get the fans excited, to sell apparel, and, even from a basketball perspective, any 3 of those guys could come in and instantly be, the 2nd or 3rd best player on the team. So that's, do not draft for fit. Just pick whoever you think is the best available. And at 3rd overall, I think it's going to be one of those 3 guys. If LaMelo is falling, then that's because the Wolves and the Warriors passed on him at 1 and 2. Because if LaMelo is there at 3, then Edwards and Wiseman are not, then I think the Wolves will take him. But if he's there at 3 and one of Edwards or Wiseman is there, they might take one of those 2 guys. That's getting a lot into the weeds of draft smoke screening, draft process, what teams in the top 3 might do. But this is an exciting draft for that reason, because we have no idea what is going to happen at the top, and the Hornets are just as much of a factor in moving up, moving down, or picking a random player as any of the other teams near the top. So, like I've said, I think Ball, Edwards, and Wiseman all make sense for them there, and if only one of them is there, take the last one left. If multiple are there, take whoever you think is the best player. Stop. Wait a minute. Okay, so this is Future Ethan here. I am recording this clip on Thursday night. I recorded this whole entire video Wednesday evening. It is now Thursday, and I've been pre-recording all week long, but I do feel like there's something I need to address that has come out today, and that is that the Hornets have emerged as a strong candidate for a potential Russell Westbrook trade. We had Russell Westbrook requesting a trade yesterday, and then now we have had confirmed reports that the Hornets are interested and they might be a potential destination. I just want to give a couple of quick thoughts on this. I think it makes sense for them, actually. I've mentioned this a couple times in this video already, but I think taking on some money, because they have to spend this cap space somewhere, and if they're not paying for a free agent, then I think taking on a guy like Russ actually makes some sense, because you can try to be an interesting team. Again, Russell Westbrook has the Jordan Brand connection with Michael Jordan as the owner, so that is something that could work as potentially getting the fans excited, similar to what I mentioned with LaMelo Ball and everybody else. But I do think this makes some sense for the Hornets to make this move. He can help you, try to push for the playoffs, get that 8th seed spot. I'm not the biggest fan of Russ, but I do think that he could help this team win. And just from an entertainment and excitement perspective, I do think that makes a lot of sense. So, as long as you don't have to give it too much, I wouldn't give up Miles Bridges. I wouldn't give up the 3rd overall pick. But if you can get him, for expiring contracts and maybe a future protected pick or 2 or something like that, then that's a move that I would definitely think about making. And that's pretty much all I have for the Charlotte Hornets. I think their offseason plan should be look for trades for some veterans, maybe take on some long-term money if you can get picks out of it, or maybe signing Montrezl Harrell if that's something you want to do, and then at the deadline maybe buyouts for Zeller and Batum if you can't find a trade for him. Just let them ride off into the sunset and go to some other contender, and potentially load up on more draft picks and younger players that are developmental, and then just spend some more of your time and resources developing guys like Devonte Graham, PJ Washington, Miles Bridges, even Malik Monk if you can get whatever you want. See if you can get anything out of Malik Monk and whoever you draft at 3rd overall this year. So that's going to be it for my Charlotte Hornets recap and preview, I guess. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. We will be back. I think my original plan was going to be uploading on Monday and Tuesday next week for the Wolves and the Warriors, but I think I'm going to switch that and just go straight through, upload Saturday and Sunday before the transaction window opens. Now, we might already have some trades that are announced even before the transaction window officially opens for the NBA, but I'm going to try to to get everything in because, especially with Golden State and Minnesota, I feel like there's gonna be, a lot of movement with those two teams specifically, whether that's trading down into the draft, Warriors getting somebody in their trade exception, Minnesota, looking for that third star, whatever happens. And I'll get into that with those two videos, but I think I'm gonna do Wolves on Saturday, Golden State on Sunday, and then Monday and Tuesday we might have videos if anything super significant goes down. Worst case, we'll have something on Wednesday for the draft, probably upload it on Thursday, and that's my plan for the next week or so. So Hornets recap, that's the end of that one. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you tomorrow with the Minnesota Timberwolves.